friends were asking you about Christmas?
Yeah, they wanted to know if we kids cared about.
Imagine a world where Christmas dies, where Santa Claus gives up, where children wake up on December 25th to nothing but empty stockings and broken dreams. In 1974, a small television special dared to ask the most terrifying question a child could hear. What if Santa just stopped believing in us? The Year Without a Santa Claus was not just another Christmas show. It was a stop-motion fever dream that haunted living rooms across America. I am about to reveal 20 facts about the Year Without a Santa Claus that will change how you see this holiday classic forever. Some will shock you. Some will make you sad. Some will make you question everything you thought you knew. Stay until the end because the final fact connects to something happening right now that will blow your mind. Are you ready? Let us pull back the curtain on the Christmas special that asked if Santa could break up with the world. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to our channel. Fact 1. Santa was voiced by the same man who played Burl Ives' characters. Mickey Rooney voiced Santa Claus in The Year Without a Santa Claus. But here is what makes it strange. Rankin, divided by Bass, had used Burl Ives as their signature Christmas narrator in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer a decade earlier. Ives became the voice of Christmas for an entire generation. But for this special, they went with Rooney instead. Why? Because they wanted Santa to sound tired, defeated, human. Mickey Rooney was a former child star who had experienced the highs and lows of Hollywood. He understood what it meant to feel washed up and forgotten. He brought genuine weariness to the role. When Santa says he is tired of being unappreciated, you hear real pain in Rooney's voice. This was not a jolly fat man. This was someone contemplating the end of his purpose. Rooney recorded his lines in a single session. He understood the assignment immediately. Give us a Santa who has lost his spark. Mission accomplished. Fact 2. Heat Miser and Snow Miser were almost cut from the special. The most iconic characters in the entire special almost did not exist. Heat Miser and Snow Miser were considered too silly and off-brand by network executives. ABC thought the musical numbers would slow down the story. They wanted a simpler tale about Santa being sick. The producers fought back. They knew those characters were gold. The Miser brothers represented something primal, the eternal conflict between opposites. Summer versus winter, fire versus ice, chaos versus order. They were also just incredibly fun. The composers wrote those songs and the network heard them and still said no. It took weeks of arguing before ABC relented. Imagine if those executives had won. Imagine the Year Without a Santa Claus, without Heat Miser and Snow Miser. It would be forgotten. Instead, those characters became the reason people remember this special at all. Sometimes the best creative choices are the ones you have to fight for. Fact 3. The puppets were made in Japan by exhausted artists. Rankin Divided by Bass was an American company, but they produced their Animagic specials in Japan. The puppet construction and animation were done at Mom Production in Tokyo. The working conditions were brutal. Animators worked 16-hour days during the production season. The detail required for stop motion meant that a single animator might produce only 5 seconds of usable footage in an entire day. Burnout was common. Some animators reported having nightmares about the puppets, about their frozen smiles and unblinking eyes. The Japanese crew brought a different aesthetic sensibility to these Christmas specials. There is something slightly uncanny about Rankin Divided by Bass puppets. They exist in a space between cute and creepy. That was not an accident. That was the result of Japanese artists interpreting American Christmas mythology through their own cultural lens. The result was unique and strange and unforgettable. Fact 4. Mrs. Claus was more powerful than Santa. In most Christmas stories, Mrs. Claus is a background character. She bakes cookies and smiles and has no agency. But in The Year Without a Santa Claus, she is the one who actually runs things. When Santa gives up, she does not panic. She strategizes. She sends the elves on a secret mission without telling her husband. She manipulates events from behind the scenes. She is the power behind the throne. This was radical for 1974. The special presented a marriage where the wife was clearly the more competent partner. Santa is depressed and passive. Mrs. Claus is active and solution-oriented. She embodies a kind of quiet, feminine power that subverts traditional gender roles. Some scholars have analyzed this special through a feminist lens. Mrs. Claus does not ask permission. She does not wait for male approval. She sees a problem and fixes it. The fact that this happened in a children Christmas special makes it even more subversive. Fact 5. The songs were written by the same team behind Rudolph. Jules Bass and Maury Laws wrote the songs for The Year Without a Santa Claus. They were the same team behind the music for Rudolph, The Red-Nosed Reindeer, and other Rankin Divided by Bass classics. But these songs were different. Darker, weirder. The Heat Miser and Snow Miser songs are not traditional Christmas carols. They are villain songs. Boastful and aggressive and slightly menacing. The composers understood that conflict makes better music than harmony. Those songs became cultural touchstones. They have been covered by rock bands and hip-hop artists. They show up in commercials and movies and TV shows. People who have never seen the full special can sing those songs word for word. That is the mark of truly great songwriting. It transcends its source material and becomes part of the collective consciousness. Fact 6. The special flopped in its original broadcast. When The Year Without a Santa Claus first aired on December 10th, 1974, the ratings were disappointing. It did not capture the massive audience that Rudolph or Frosty had achieved. Critics were mixed. Some thought it was too downbeat for a Christmas special. Others found the animation creepy. ABC considered it a failure and did not give it much promotion in subsequent years. The special could have disappeared into obscurity, but something strange happened. Home video changed everything. When the special was released on VHS in the 1,980 seconds, families discovered it. Kids watched it over and over. The songs got stuck in heads. The characters became beloved. By the 1,990 seconds, The Year Without a Santa Claus had achieved cult classic status. It became one of those things that everyone remembered from childhood, even if they could not explain why. The failure became a success through persistence and repetition. Sometimes art needs time to find its audience. Fact 7. There is a dark theory about Mother Nature. Mother Nature appears in the special as the boss of both Heat Miser and Snow Miser. She is presented as their mother and the ultimate authority on weather. But fan theories have emerged over the decades suggesting something darker. Some believe Mother Nature is not really their mother, but a prisoner of her role. She must maintain balance between her sons, but she seems exhausted by it. Others theorize that Heat Miser and Snow Miser are not brothers at all, but two aspects of the same destructive force that Mother Nature must constantly contain. The special never explains the mythology. Where did these characters come from? What is their true nature? Why does Mother Nature have such absolute power over them? The ambiguity allows for endless interpretation. Some fans love this, others find it frustrating. But the mystery is part of what makes the special memorable. Not everything needs to be explained. Fact 8. The animation was deliberately jerky to save money. Stop-motion animation requires photographing each tiny movement of the puppets. The more frames you shoot, the smoother the motion appears. Disney-level animation uses 24 frames per second. Rankin Divided by Bass typically used 12 to 16 frames per second. This made the movement jerkier and more unnatural, but it also cut production time and costs in half. The limited animation became part of the Rankin Divided by Bass aesthetic. That slightly jerky movement gives the specials a dreamlike quality. The characters do not move like real creatures. They move like half-remembered fantasies, like images from a fever dream. Modern viewers sometimes find it off-putting, but for those who grew up with these specials, the jerky motion is comforting. It signals that you are entering a specific kind of Christmas story, one that exists outside normal reality. Fact 9. Mickey Rooney recorded his lines without seeing the puppets. Voice recording for animated projects typically happens before the animation is complete. Mickey Rooney recorded all his dialogue for Santa Claus without ever seeing what the puppet looked like or how the scenes would be staged. He worked purely from the script and the director guidance. This was standard practice, but it required enormous skill. Rooney had to imagine the emotional context of each scene and deliver accordingly. He had to match the energy of characters and situations he could not see. The fact that his performance feels so connected to the visuals is a testament to his talent. He created a three-dimensional character using only his voice. When you watch the special, you believe that Puppet is alive and tired and sad. That is all Rooney. He gave Santa a soul with nothing but his vocal performance. Fact 10. The elves Jingle and Jangle have disturbing implications. Jingle and Jangle are the two elves Mrs. Claus sends to find proof that people still care about Christmas. They go rogue. They disobey orders. They make unauthorized deals with supernatural weather deities. Think about what this means. Santa's entire operation is based on surveillance and judgment. He knows who is naughty or nice. He watches everyone. But he cannot control his own employees. His elves undermine him. His wife goes behind his back. Santa is not an all-powerful figure in this special. He is a tired manager who has lost control of his organization. The elves represent the breakdown of hierarchical authority. They act independently because they believe the mission is more important than the rules. This is either admirable rebellion or dangerous insubordination, depending on your perspective. Either way, it is a strange thing to include in a children Christmas special. Fact 11. Snow Miser puppet had to be rebuilt multiple times. The Snow Miser puppet kept melting under the hot production lights. This is ironic and tragic. A character made of ice and snow could not survive the physical conditions required to film him. The puppet was constructed with materials that were susceptible to heat. Every few hours of filming, the puppet would start to warp and droop. The production team had to build multiple backup versions. Animators worked quickly during Snow Miser scenes, knowing they had limited time before the puppet became unusable. This technical challenge actually improved the performance. There was urgency in every Snow Miser scene because the crew knew they were racing against physics. The character feels manic and unstable. That is partially because the puppet literally was unstable. Sometimes limitations create happy accidents. Fact 12. The special predicted climate change anxiety. Think about the plot. The weather is out of control. Heat and cold are fighting for dominance. The natural order is breaking down. Mother Nature struggles to maintain balance. Does this sound familiar? The Year Without a Santa Claus accidentally predicted the climate change anxieties of the 21st century. It presented a world where weather extremes are personified and in conflict, where the systems that maintain seasonal balance are failing, where human concerns seem insignificant compared to massive environmental forces. The special was not intentionally about climate change. That concept barely existed in 1974, but the metaphor works perfectly. Heat Miser and Snow Miser are not just cute characters. They represent the breakdown of natural systems. The fact that a Christmas special from 50 years ago resonates with modern environmental fears is both impressive and depressing. Fact 13. There was a controversial live-action remake. In 2006, NBC produced a live-action remake of The Year Without a Santa Claus. It starred John Goodman as Santa and featured elaborate musical numbers with the Miser brothers. The production was expensive and heavily promoted. It was also largely hated by fans of the original. The charm of stop motion cannot be replicated with human actors and CGI. The uncanny puppet aesthetic was replaced with glossy corporate polish. What made the original special weird and memorable was sanded down into something safe and forgettable. The remake has been mostly forgotten. It proved that some things should not be updated. The limitations and strangeness of the 1974 version were not flaws to be fixed. They were essential to its identity. You cannot remake a fever dream and expect it to have the same power. Fact 14. The special was banned in some religious households. Some conservative Christian families refused to let their children watch The Year Without a Santa Claus. Why? Because it depicted Santa as fallible and human. Because it questioned whether Christmas could survive without belief. Because it presented a secular version of faith and redemption. For families who saw Christmas as a religious holiday about Jesus, the special seemed to elevate Santa to an inappropriate level. It made him the central figure whose existence determined whether Christmas happened. Some religious leaders criticized Rankin divided by Bass for promoting materialism and idol worship. These criticisms were rare, but they existed. The irony is that the special is actually about the importance of belief and community. It argues that Christmas survives because people come together and care about each other. But some viewers could not see past the Santa-centric narrative. The controversy was minor, but it revealed deep tensions about what Christmas means. Fact 15. Heat Miser was originally going to be the villain. Early drafts of the script made Heat Miser the antagonist. He was supposed to deliberately sabotage Christmas by making the weather too warm for snow. The story would have been about stopping his evil plan, but the writers realized that was too simplistic. Instead, they made both Miser brothers neutral forces. Neither is evil. They are just doing what their nature demands. Heat Miser makes things hot, because that is what he is. Snow Miser makes things cold for the same reason. They are not villains. They are embodiments of natural principles. This was a more sophisticated approach. It taught kids that conflict does not always come from evil intentions. Sometimes, opposing forces are both valid. Sometimes there is no bad guy. Just different perspectives and needs that must be negotiated. That is a complex lesson for a Christmas special aimed at children. Fact 16. The Southtown, USA sequence was added last minute. The scenes where Jingle and Jangle visit Southtown, USA and try to make it snow were not in the original script. The producers felt the special needed more human characters and a clearer emotional arc, so they added the Southtown sequence during production. This required building new sets and puppets on a tight deadline. The Mrs. Claus character in Southtown who helps the elves was designed and built in less than a week. The rushed production shows in subtle ways. The Southtown scenes have slightly different visual texture than the rest of the special. But the addition was necessary. It gave the story a human element. It showed real people caring about Christmas. It provided the evidence that Santa needed to believe again. Without Southtown, the special would have been too abstract. The last-minute additions saved the narrative. Fact 17. Voice actors recorded separately and never met. In modern animated productions, table reads are common. The voice cast sits together and performs the script as a group. This was not done for The Year Without a Santa Claus. Each actor recorded their lines separately in isolated sessions. Mickey Rooney never met the actors playing Heat Miser and Snow Miser. They never heard each other's performances. They created their characters in complete isolation. The final product was assembled in editing. This was standard practice for Rankin divided by Bass, but it required the actors to work without any feedback or interaction. They had to imagine the other performances and respond to voices they had never heard. The fact that the final special feels like a cohesive ensemble performance is remarkable. These actors created chemistry without ever being in the same room. Fact 18. The special inspired countless parodies and homages. The Heat Miser and Snow Miser have appeared in everything from The Simpsons to Robot Chicken to Saturday Night Live. They have been parodied and referenced in dozens of shows and movies. The songs have been covered by artists ranging from Big Bad Voodoo Daddy to RuPaul Drag Race contestants. The characters transcended their original special and became cultural icons. When you need a visual shorthand for extreme heat or cold, you reference the Miser Brothers. They entered the public consciousness in a way that most Christmas special characters never do. Frosty and Rudolph are famous because they are the main characters of their specials. Heat Miser and Snow Miser are famous despite being supporting characters. They stole the show and then stole a place in pop culture history. Fact 19. There is a missing scene that explains everything. According to people who worked on the special, there was a scene that was cut for time. In this scene, Mother Nature explains the cosmic rules that govern Christmas and weather and belief. She lays out the mythology of the world, why Santa exists, where the Miser Brothers came from, what happens if people stop believing. This scene would have answered all the fan questions and theories. But it was cut because the special was running long and network television had strict time limits. That missing scene exists somewhere in the Rankin divided by Bass archives. Maybe on film, maybe just in script form, but it has never been released. Fans have begged for decades to see it. The producers who remember it say it was beautiful and profound and it made everything make sense. But we will probably never see it. The mystery remains. Fact 20. The original puppets were lost for decades, then found. After production wrapped, the puppets were packed away in storage. Rankin, divided by Bass, did not have a museum or archive. The puppets sat in boxes in a warehouse for years. Eventually, the warehouse was sold, and the contents were dispersed. For decades, nobody knew where the original Santa and Mrs. Claus and Miser Brothers puppets were. Collectors searched. Film historians tried to track them down. Nothing. Then in 2005, someone found them at an estate sale. Just sitting in a box marked Christmas decorations. The puppets were damaged. 50 years of neglect had not been kind, but they were real.